first presenter who, here we go. It's actually you, Paul. Yay! Paul from Infosoft will be presenting Business Object as part of BIA strategy for the next decade. Welcome, Paul.
Okay, it won't let me share my screen. Thank you.
You should be able to now.
Okay, great. Everybody see my screen?
Not just yet.
Okay, let's try again. Share screen. Share again.
There we go.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Yes, I haven't presented at a user group meeting for a couple of years now. It's been really intriguing. You know, I mean, I've done keynotes and things like that at our conferences, but at an actual user group meeting, I think it's been since 2019 was the last time I presented. And what was interesting was I actually was looking to present this particular presentation of business objects as part of your BI strategy for the next decade last year in 2020, as we started, you know, the new decade. But everybody had just better presentations than I did, and they were technical and they were great, and they were, you know, showing new features and new functions, and 4.3 came out, and so I kind of just got pushed back a little bit there. But one of the presentations that was supposed to be presented here today, person went on vacation, and a slot opened up, and Lucy said, "Paul, you need to fill the slot." I said, "I've got a presentation." So here we are. And this is very, very significant. Actually, it's more significant in 2021 than it was in 2020. You know, Business Objects still remains the most widely used BI suite in the world today in 2021. And that's pretty significant. Now, of course, we cannot, you know, deny that we've all had some very interesting and challenging times since the pandemic started, you know, at the beginning of 2020. And so the last 18 months have been very, very different to what most people, and anybody for that matter, on a global basis expected. And at the beginning, when there were a tremendous amount of lockdowns, people were being told to work from home. There was a lot of restrictions in place on a global basis. The philosophy at that time was, look, this is not a time to go out and start new business intelligence projects where you're going to buy new business intelligence tools and new products that you haven't used before. This is a time where you need to double down and use what you already have. And guess what? Well, you have Business Objects because it's there. It's been there, you know, a long time. And the three things that most organizations were trying to control throughout the pandemic was time, resource, and cost, budget. They all had budget constraints, so nobody wanted to spend a lot of money at the beginning. Resources have been reduced in most cases, and if you needed something, you needed to get it done as soon as possible, even though you had limited resources and limited budget to do it with. And so the best approach was obviously to leverage and use what you have. And we saw a lot of organizations, both, you know, Fortune 50 companies all the way down to small organizations, you know, using Business Objects, web intelligence, even crystal reports in ways they had never thought of using it before because that's what they had at times. Here we are trying to find out, okay, my business is down 30%. My staff count is down, 25%. How do I still stay in business? How do I still pay my vendors? How do I do all these things? This is business intelligence. And so business intelligence itself was more in demand than ever. But with these constraints of time, resource, and budget. And so those people that just leveraged what they had did very well. Most people who were looking to move to something new in terms of a BI tool set deferred. They pushed it back. Some people are now coming around to looking at these things in 2021, but there were very few new projects that emerged, in that first 6 months of the pandemic. So leverage what you have in place, use business objects, and that's what people did. Now, just over a month ago, Howard Dresner and the Dresner Group put out a very interesting report that I read on what they call their Wisdom of the Crowds survey. So basically what they do is they send out these surveys to CIOs and various people in the business intelligence industry and so forth, to kind of see where the trends are in business intelligence. And this particular survey was the one focused on self-service BI. So this is the one where, everybody talks about Tableau and PowerBI and all these self-service tools and so forth. And it's interesting that if you read the executive summary at the beginning of the Dresner report, it kind of skips over the main part of what people actually voted for and just focuses on the self-service piece. But in terms of what are the most important things you look for in a BI solution, self-service came up as number 6. So after all these years, it's only got to number 6 as being the most significant and important thing. And guess what number 1 was, which has been number 1 consistently year after year after year since this survey began, is reporting. BI reporting is number 1. That is the most important thing to people in terms of business intelligence. And just as a side note here, guess what number 2 is? Number 2 is dashboards. So number 1, BI reporting. Number 2, dashboards. Number 6 is self-service BI. So what that tells us is the reality of where people are still today. That despite, Gartner and Forrester and other, big so-called BI industry experts telling us 10, 12 years ago that the shift had already happened and that we had gone away from reporting and everything was now self-service BI and we were all going to be, data scientists and get all this information ourselves and so forth. That never happened, right? It was a smokescreen. What reality has is that we still, in most organizations, have at least 80% plus of our employees, 80% plus are consumers of business intelligence information. They are not creators of it. They are not doing self-service. They are simply consuming it. Give me the information I need right now, and let me get on with my job. Okay, I'm not going to sit there and drill into information and do analysis and figure this out and figure that out. There are people who are employed to do that, business analysts and so forth. It's their job. And yes, they'll fall into the 20% who will do self-service BI in terms of things like data discovery and make use of tools like Tableau and Power BI in order to do that and visualize those findings and so forth. But the majority of BI users remain consumers. And guess what? The number one BI reporting tool out there is BusinessObjects. And between Web Intelligence and Crystal Reports, they completely dominate the BI reporting marketplace. So because of that, right, as our dear friend Mr. Spock, right, tells us all the time, it's only logical that you would keep business objects, right, and that you would exist in this state of coexistence. So the reality today here in the United States is around 45% of the business objects customer base uses Tableau, and somewhere between 30 and 35% use Power BI. So add up the numbers, folks. We're looking at 75 to 80% of all business objects users are using either Tableau or Power BI, or in some cases, both. And so that is a fact. That state of coexistence is there. And, while, people can pretend it isn't, they can try to ignore it. Unfortunately, the reality is this. There is absolutely negligible coexistence with SAC. It truly is not a contender in the BI space. SAP doesn't want to hear that, but it's the reality. And so SAC will go in its own direction. It will become a very useful tool for embedded analytics purposes, within SAP's cloud-based applications. It'll become a point solution for certain things that SAP creates and so forth. But the general business is not going to go out there and select SAC as its BI tool of choice over Tableau and Power BI. Just not going to happen.
Paul,
Yep.
we have a question from Ron Campbell, came in through the chat section,
Yep.
and he's asking do you think dashboards will become more important than reporting?
Probably not. And it's a good question. Dashboards are number two, and they won't get to number one. And the reason they won't get to number one is because what's really happening out there is that people want, and I just wrote a blog on this, bite-sized pieces of information sent out to them. So they just want what they want so they can get their job done. And, the vehicle for doing that going forward is going to be mobile, and people are just going to have things sent to their mobile, and they're not going to want to have a dashboard sent to their mobile device where they're going to have to, drill in and analyze and so forth. They just want to see simple pieces of data. So, I think dashboarding will always be significant and important. It's not going away. It's going to remain there alongside reporting, but in my opinion, reporting will always stay number one. Good question.
Thank you, Paul. So we have one more question in the questions panels from Handy. It says 30 to 35% use Power BI to consume SAP data through Universe or SAP BW. We are having performance issues when trying to connect Power BI to SAP BW.
Yes. Sorry, Handy. I mean, there's a lot of SAP customers who use Tableau or Power BI to access BW data. And obviously, SAP has not, set up those data sources always to be ideal for access by Microsoft products and Salesforce products. However, right, what I can tell you is that there are a lot of customers out there that have successfully found ways to do this. And so, I think it's a question of looking to the third parties and looking to others, not to SAP, the vendor itself, for the answer to why Power BI is not performing as well as it should be against BW. Microsoft will be far more interested in solving that problem than SAP will. Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so what I thought I'd do is just step you through a few examples of customers in the last year who have been implementing some, or last year and a half, some interesting solutions using business objects, or using a combination in this coexistence state of business objects in Tableau or business objects in Power BI. So here's a global paint manufacturer, and what they do is really interesting. They are a big Tableau shop. They are also a big business objects user. Historically, they've been business objects. They do their key reporting through business objects, but they push their business objects data and information into Tableau, which is then automatically distributed on a global basis, both in the form of dashboards and different kinds of workbooks that are sent out every day, every week, every quarter to many, many different people. And in the case of the dashboards, they're live, and so people can interact with them. In other cases, they're actually sending out published reports in the form of PDF or Excel, which have been published from those Tableau workbooks, all of them being distributed. But here's a customer that's a great example of that coexistence state between business objects and Tableau. No plans, right, to change that. It will cost them a lot to replace the back end in terms of everything they've built around business objects to feed that data into Tableau, and it makes no sense at all. At the same time, they also send out a whole bunch of web intelligence reports, and likewise, users receive those alongside their Tableau information, and they also are published often in Excel or PDF, and they receive those as well. So a great example of coexistence. Another one, a national supermarket chain with approximately 3,500 to 4,000 supermarkets across the country. They use Crystal reports for all of their out of stock reports. And imagine, that these 4,000 odd stores have to report this every day in terms of, what's been sold, from the point of sale machines, that this information is being gathered and so forth. And as you know, they have very limited storage space in the warehouse of the supermarket itself. So every 24 hours, trucks, show up and bring things, for restocking the shelves and so forth. And so those out of stock reports are absolutely critical to any retail chain, particularly a retail grocery chain, and so forth. Again, all of this is done in Crystal reports. All of this is pushed out to to the managers of stores in PDF or Excel format from the Crystal reports. But right across the whole organization, this is a Power BI shop for everything for self-service, data exploration, data discovery, data visualization, they use Power BI. But, you know, again, fantastic state of coexistence, and they're very happy to continue this way. And I think I can't see that changing for the next decade either, as well. A national drug distribution company. This one's quite interesting because obviously this, came to a head with the pandemic, and treating, patients with COVID and just treating patients throughout the pandemic as well. That it was important to get certain drugs to pharmacies, to hospitals, to distribution centers, clinics, and so forth. And again, this organization actually has both Tableau and Power BI and BusinessObjects, and they tried to create the tracking solution in Tableau, but they couldn't get all of the information easily in Tableau, but it was already there and existed in BusinessObjects because they've been doing this, for a long time using various BusinessObjects reports. And so what they ended up doing was creating new dashboards using web intelligence and the new features that are available in 4.2, along with add-on components from Need4Viz, a third party that has produced some very, very nice visual add-on components for web intelligence. And they were able to produce something that far exceeded the prototype they had done in Tableau, but more importantly, got all the information. Particularly things like being able to track to the shippers and so forth, so that if you're looking, okay, what is the exact status of this shipment right now, it will automatically link you to FedEx or UPS, and you can pull that information straight into your Webby dashboard, and you can see exactly where the shipment is, when it's going to be delivered, and so on and so forth. So again, interesting, because the trend within the organization was to move to Tableau, Power BI. That's what they've been doing for the last few years. And yet along comes a critical application needed during the COVID pandemic, and they end up creating it in web intelligence, using web intelligence dashboards. And I think that's going to bring a new lease of life to doing other things in BusinessObjects and web intelligence in this organization as well. So let's move and talk about some people who have bought BusinessObjects for the first time in the last couple of years. And this might be surprising to some of you, but BusinessObjects still sells out there, and people buy it and they love it. And so this is a nationwide real estate investment trust traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They own hundreds of commercial properties, anything from healthcare buildings to movie theaters, to warehouses, to restaurants, and so forth. And they, as well as help, as lease those buildings out and so forth, they provide credit and financial options for their clients as well. So they needed better insights into the investment portfolio of their customers, so that they could make sure from an underwriting standpoint that they were selecting the right clients, and that the business they were in, their credit track record and so forth was going to be a good solid investment and so forth. And they had an unfortunate incident a few years back where a certain restaurant chain had gone belly up, and obviously they lost out on those on monies from those properties and so forth. And the COO at the time turned around and said, could we have predicted that? And the way they were doing things was they used Excel, and they had a department of several people who were doing these very sophisticated spreadsheet analyses, looking at the portfolio of the customers. And they spent a week or so looking at the trends and so forth. And they came back to the COO and said, actually, yes, we could have done, we could have predicted that. And so it was at that point that they said, we need to get business intelligence. We need to do this properly and so forth. And they put out an RFP, and we won the RFP with a combination of selling them the BusinessObjects suite with Tableau. So we actually sold them a coexisting solution. The idea being that, they would build out what they really needed for regular operations and so forth, using web intelligence and being able to do drill down and so forth. But also there was those ad hoc type situations, and they had some power users there that definitely could have taken advantage from doing the self-service data visualization and data exploration. So we provided Tableau licenses for them as well, and ended up creating a data warehouse in the cloud. And now they've also built out some very neat dashboards using Squirrel 365 as well. So, this is a very interesting situation of a company moving in a very, very fast trajectory towards business intelligence, data warehousing in just a couple of years, and BusinessObjects being, the fundamental underpinning of that as well. Okay, don't know where that came from. Another one is another brand new name customer, a new BusinessObjects BI deployment at a medical imaging lab. And again, they didn't really have any business intelligence there at all. But what they really wanted was a reporting solution, a business intelligence reporting solution. And the VP of data there and IT had previously used in his previous job BusinessObjects, and he came to us and he said, I think this would be the best reporting tool to use. I loved it when I worked with it at my previous company and so forth. And so we helped them implement a BI tool, a BI solution just around BusinessObjects itself. And that's been very successful as well. And then in the previous session, you heard Rajesh talk about the city of Yonkers and the deployment of a very interesting application written in .NET for doing both parking tickets and code enforcement tickets and so forth, and how we integrated Crystal into that for doing a lot of the notices and letters that would go out to people. But for the business intelligence, right, we bundled BusinessObjects with the solution. And so they use web intelligence, and they get a lot of their insights and important information in terms of trending and what's happening and across the system through BusinessObjects. So those are just a few examples so that you could get a feel, an idea that yes, look, BusinessObjects is very much thriving out there. People are using it in a coexistence mode with Tableau and PowerBI, and new customers who have never had BI before are getting BusinessObjects for the first time as well. So that's why I say it's going to be around very, very much so for the next decade. At IBIS in June, SAP presented about the next version of BusinessObjects BI 4.3 Service Pack 2, which will be released in December of 2021. and there's some great new features coming with that. Most importantly, it's got the catch-up features of pieces that were missing from Service Pack 1. And so therefore, most customers will move to BI 4.3 with Service Pack 2. And that will be next year in 2022. But these are a few of the extra features that are in Service Pack 2, freeze pane for both header and columns, a new presentation mode. You can do conditional hide of reports or blocks within reports. You have a data enrichment capability now where you can actually change a dimension to a measure on the fly. And probably one of the most significant things is the data sources that, BI 4.3 brought along this idea of using Webby as a data source. So therefore you could create, a kind of a composite set of data from a Webby query, and then you can put the universe on top of that, right, to create, other reports, other queries, other drag and drop actions for people, and not have to have the whole universe available to them, just the parts that are relevant to them. Well, that capability now extends to OData, to Google Drive, to Excel data sources. So you can basically put a universe on any business objects data source. It doesn't just have to be Webby, right? It can be OData, it can be Google Drive, it can be Excel, and you can use the power of the query panel and the semantic layer to drag and drop. And also there's an enhanced formula editor as well. So some pretty cool features coming along there. And we presented at IBIS during the keynote that USPI was looking to use this new feature for using Webby as a data source, to simplify some of the processes that they have in place today. And so people are already, making plans to use these new features, functions. Business objects in the cloud. Yes, we are finally starting to see more and more customers move business objects to the cloud. The key thing is that last point there. It really only makes sense when the majority of your business objects data sources are in the cloud or cloud hosted, that you then want to move business objects to the cloud. It doesn't make any sense if the majority of the data sources are still on premise. You should leave business objects on premise as well. So business objects can be easily hosted in the cloud. We've moved many customers to the cloud. Some of those deployments, in fact, that you saw there with those new clients were straight cloud deployments right away. So we didn't even bother to put business objects on premise. We just deployed it in the cloud. Infosol has been running business objects in the cloud for 3 or 4 years ourselves. It's not difficult. It's just the same. You're just installing it, on a cloud environment, it's a hosted cloud environment, instead of, on a server, in a data center or on your on-premise somewhere. So the most popular option out there is for customers to use their existing private cloud. Most customers today already have a private cloud. They use applications like Salesforce or other applications. A lot of people now, are starting to look at creating data warehouses in the cloud. Snowflake has become very popular for that. And so, once they move those data sources in the cloud, they already have their own private cloud. They would just move business objects there as well. And that's pretty straightforward to do. SAP announced earlier this year that it has a new offering called the Business Objects Private Cloud Edition, PCE. The way it's being positioned and promoted, you would think it was something remarkable and revolutionary, but it's not. It's just it's just hosting business objects on hyperscale. So you can pick, you can have it on Azure, you can have it on Google Cloud Platform, you can have it on AWS, But the difference will be that SAP will manage it for you. And, that means taking backups and doing recoveries and, keeping things running. As far as performance is concerned, the way it operates is what they call T-shirt size. So you have to pick between, small, medium, large in terms of the amount of memory and CPU and disks that you want. And then that will become, your deployment in, on hyperscale. They include in their package one update a year, so one service pack update a year, and you can decide when you want that to be done. But as far as day-to-day operations are concerned, day-to-day administration, business objects administration, you remain responsible for that. As far as getting all of your stuff into the cloud, you remain responsible for that, or you can farm it out to a third party as well. And you will have to change your licensing as well, because obviously the licensing is included as part of that cloud offering. And then the other solution is to use other third-party clouds. So there's companies out there, including Infosolv, that will host for the small to medium customers who want to who don't want to host themselves and don't have their own private cloud. So what should you expect from SAP in the next decade as far as business objects is concerned? Well, I don't think you're going to see any major changes. And as I point out there in parentheses, why change a good thing? They haven't really messed around with business objects too much over the last decade, and it's done incredibly well. It's thrived. And so maybe, they're kind of saying, well, maybe we shouldn't mess around with it too much in this decade. And what I mean by that is, adding, machine learning and artificial intelligence and new technologies and things like that to it. They're not going to do that. And so there'll be no major, technology type changes in that regard. They will continue to add new functionality, particularly into web intelligence, into the universe, and so forth. And these will come with the annual service packs. So the next service pack for BI 4.3 is Service Pack 2, which comes out in December. You can expect to see Service Pack 3 a year later and Service Pack 4 a year after that. So they're probably going to come out with these service packs on about a 12-month basis. Every 12 months, you'll see a new service pack. And those packs, as I said, will have new functionality as well as fixes in them as well. They will be pushing very, very hard this year, next year, and for the foreseeable future to get customers to move to the Business Objects Private Cloud Edition. And that's the direction they're talking in. There has been, some talk out there that that's the only version they're going to support after 2027. I take that with a pinch of salt at this point. It's too early to make that kind of prediction yet, and we'll see.